So there's kind of what we're looking for. We're going fishing. I mean, of course, it's not a big fish. It's what we're looking for, though, right? Something to catch. And that's about an eating size fish if you wanted to. So let's talk a little bit more about fishing today while we're drifting down this beautiful little creek. What we're out here for, how to do it, a few more details. I'm D.W. Verts, Hickbilly Outdoors. More lessons on how to fish coming your way. What I'd like to see y'all take from this little video is that fishing is simple, it's not hard. You don't have to have a bunch of different lures, a bunch of different baits to catch fish. Don't go spend a bunch of money. We'll have another video sometime coming up where we'll talk about specific things for specific fish, but for beginners, for people trying to relearn, maybe reboot, keep it simple. Figure out what kind of fish you want to catch and have fun doing it. I don't know if the camera can see that gar right there or not. A bunch of gar. Gar aren't really considered a fish most people want to catch, but they're a lot of fun. They fight really good. Well, finally got one of them, for what it's worth. Look at that. Look at that snake. And actually, if they're big enough, they're really good eating. I mean, really good. And they're not hard to get to bite. They're hard to hook. So this video I'm going to do right now is about what are we going to fish for and how are we going to do it. I've said in videos before that it helps to have a type of fish in mind, one you want to catch, or learn how to generalize and fish a lure like this one. It's a little 2.5 inch Rapala minnow that'll catch almost anything that swims. Like that beetle spin I did in a video the other day, it'll catch anything. I am not a bait fisherman, hardly ever. I just prefer lure fishing. And I'm mostly a bass fisherman, and boy, that said gar, look at gar all over that thing. Look at him. Look at him. So, if you want to fish for catfish, you know catfishing, you can catch them on lures, but you're going to do better overall with some sort of bait. If you want to catch panfish, brim, sunfish, like I'm catching a bunch of here today, you can use bait for them or lures. Same goes with crappie. Actually, the same goes any kind of fish. You can catch them on anything you want to fish with that looks like what they generally eat. So these fish, these creeks obviously eat minnows, and they're not hard to catch on lures that look like minnows, which most lures look like minnows. How's that for making a bunch of sense? I'm in a fantastic situation here. I'm fishing a place I've never fished before in my life. Arrowhead hunted. I've trapped this creek, this section. I've never fished here, and the fish are biting like crazy. No big fish, but I'm catching fish easy. It's hard to take a break to do this because the fish are biting like crazy. I saw one good bass, a really good bass for a creek. I've had about a 2-foot long gar on a while ago, and lots of sunfish. So I'm in a lucky place. It's a good place to be, and there's no sign of it quitting, and I've got a ways to go. That's pretty cool. But how do you do it? I'm throwing this little 2.5 inch minnow, balsam minnow bait to catch anything that swims. But you may not want to fish with lures. That's good. That's cool. Whatever you want to fish with. So let's talk real quick about bait. Probably the #1 bait used across the country, I don't know, maybe around the world, are worms or night crawlers. They'll catch anything. They catch walleye. They troll them. Bass fishing, the guys up north have used them for years. They inject them with air to make them float up. It's all kinds of science to it. Or just glob them on a treble hook for a catfish. They're available just about everywhere. I mean, you can buy them even. I never could see buying them, but a shovel or a pitchfork or a potato fork will get you plenty of them. Worms are hard to beat. I would say, like turkeys flying down there. Look like turkeys. Isn't that cool? Oops. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt my video. There's still turkeys down there. They don't know what to make of me. Gosh, it's a nice day on the creek. So, they're still flying down there. I'm easily distracted. Worms are the best thing in the world for panfish. Really good for catfish. I've caught carp. They catch anything. So, it's hard to get away from it. You can find them about anywhere. It's hard to do. Hard to do without if you're going to fish for bait. You can fish them on the bottom. You can fish them under a bobber. Really versatile bait. When it comes to baits that catch panfish, I've never used crickets. I used to sell them in a tackle shop. Crickets are deadly. I mean, deadly on brim. I don't know if they would be better in the long run than worms, but they obviously have a place. I've never fished with the mealworms, never fished with maggots. I've never fished any of those other kind of baits like that. They all obviously catch fish, so I'm not the one to talk about it. If I was going to fish with bait today, overall, it'd be the worms. When it comes to catfish, there's some other choices. There's prepared baits, there's stink baits, there's baits you can make yourself. I did my catfish video last fall, October or so, and I fished with a stink bait that I bought at the tackle shop. And it's just a spongy, nasty blood bait. I don't remember, it had shad or whatever it had in it. Stinks, but catfish feed a lot by smell. The first thing they do is smell a bait or taste a bait coming through the water. Stink baits. Those dip baits, they're a cheesy bait, and you take a plastic worm with treble hook and it has a bunch of ridges on it. You just dip it in the bait and it sticks to it. A few minutes, probably 10-15 minutes, you crank it and you do it again. Wow, did we whack them on that a couple times over the years. Minnows. Like I'm fishing so balsam minnow, minnows catch everything. Minnows may be well, you know what? Minnows are the most versatile bait you can use for every fish. Depending how big a minnow, how you rig it. And that includes using sunfish for catfish, would be like using a minnow. Some of these sunfish I've been catching today are perfect for catching flathead. If not, maybe too small. You take minnows, like they sell down the road here. My buddy has a minnow hatchery actually. And shiner minnows mostly. There's several dace minnows. There's several kinds across the country. There's the gobies and there's the herring and all those. And of course, cut shad around here is huge. People cut the shad up. I would prefer using it live. And it can be used live. It's just a little bit tricky. A minnow will catch every fish that swims in the water. Trout, bass, catfish, crappie, of course. Crappie, more minnows are used up on crappie every year than anything else, I'm sure. If you want to catch fish on bait, and you need to learn how to fish a minnow, it's not hard to do. I am a lure fisherman, and that it can get very confusing. It can get huge confusing. The little tackle box I bring with me to the creeks like this. I probably got 20 lures just in that little box. Nothing fancy, but enough things to cover the gamut of different things I want to look like, mostly minnows. One thing a lot of my lures look like, though, is crawdads. And I've only fished crawdads one time in my life. It was crazy what it did to the bass in a little creek once. Crawdads are tremendous baits, again, for almost every kind of fish. Crawdads are not hard to find. You can find them for free. You can buy them, of course. And then you can buy extras and eat them, too. How's that for simple? The whole point of what I'm trying to say here is you first off decide what you want to fish for. What do you want to catch? If you don't care what you catch, plain old-fashioned earthworms are going to be just about as good as it gets. And I would throw them out, obviously, under a bobber or on the bottom. Like that snake. That snake has no fears at all. You see him? I know I'm getting distracted. I get it. Plain old water snake. No threat to anybody. So if you don't care what you're fishing for, if you don't care what you're catching, worms be hard to beat. That'd be my first choice. When it comes to lures, if you don't care what you're catching, that little beetle spin like I did in that last video, and I've done the last couple videos, my fishing videos and a regular just out catching fish video, or this little 2.5 inch Rapala minnow. Wow, it looks like a minnow. That box is full of spinners and crappie jigs. A little crappie jig or a little hair jig, a little marabou crappie jig. You could survive with a lure like that. You could live in the wild. You can catch enough fish on those things to survive. Simple. Don't make it hard. When it comes to fishing with lures, sometimes it takes a few different rods and reels to make that work. Where bait fishing, that medium action rod with 8 or 10, 12 pound line like I talked about in one of my first videos is all you need. How's that for simple? So why don't I use bait? Well, I bass fish a lot, and that's a lure deal. But even on this creek right now, I could be using some worms and catching a bunch of these same fish, maybe even more of those little fish. I don't think I'd be catching quite as many bass, but I'd catch a few probably. I like the challenge of throwing different lures. I like the challenge of figuring things out. And truthfully, I can make more casts, catch more fish, be more efficient with a lure. I'm not all the time having to worry about changing bait and keeping bait on the hook and keeping bait alive and things like that. I don't have to worry about that with a lure. Does that make me a professional or anything? No, I don't care what you fish with. That's why I'm doing these videos, because you ought to be having fun with anything. But I can make this little minnow look like anything I want. I can fish on top water. I fish it down below. There's a fish coming after it right there. And I don't think I'm that impatient a person, but I just like to be doing something. And there's something to be said for watching a bobber or just watching a rod tip. What I got there. But see that, I don't know how I would even catch a bass doing that with a worm. I don't know how to do that. It's a nice bass too. Look at that one. That's a nice one. I just like fishing with lures. But it doesn't matter what you like fishing with, as long as you're fishing. Boy, he's got another one chasing him down. Look at that, 2 at a time. He's that other bass. He wants that lure too. Look at him. He's a bigger bass, of course. Look at him. Isn't that cool? That's just the way I've fished since I was pretty young. I started bass fishing, started lure fishing. I don't even fish bait for crappie. The only time I've ever fished bait for crappie in my life was when I was guiding. And there's people just wanting to use minnows. And that's fine. And actually, a quick tip here. If I can ever get this. Yeah, pretty fish. Quick trip here, bye guy, is when it comes to minnow fishing for crappie, about 9 months out of the year, minnows don't stand a chance against me with my lures for big crappie. They don't stand a chance. But in the hottest part of the summer, middle of June till about middle of September, about now, you just can't beat minnows for big crappie. I mean, I've got a couple things I do, but it's kind of tricky. So if you're going to be fishing for crappie in the summertime and you want to catch good ones, yeah, 12, 13 inches and bigger, you're gonna catch more of them using minnows. That's kind of a pro's tip there. It's just a fact. I'm gonna keep throwing lures because that's what I like to do. You do whatever you like to do. Have fun doing it. And that's all that matters, having a good time. No matter what you fish for, and decide what you want to fish for, what you want to catch, and go from there. And we'll talk about that a little bit in another video, I think. Use that little 2.5 inch Rapala right there, or one like it, little rubber minnow, whatever, and you can catch almost anything that swims. Figure out what you want to catch and go for that with different lures accordingly. There you go. Thanks for watching this, y'all. Talk to you later.